But first tonight, the Workers' Rights Amendment is on the ballot this November. It would guarantee Illinois workers the right to collectively bargain for things like wages, hours, and working conditions. There you can see the text of the amendment. So what does this mean for Illinois workers and the economy? Joining us are Jacob Huebert, he's president of the Liberty Justice Center, and Mark Poulos, executive director of the Indiana, Illinois, and Iowa Foundation for Fair Contracting. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. First of all, Mark Poulos, if I can begin with you. And first of all, let's take another look at the language so we can get a clearer idea of, or exact idea of what it says. Employees shall have the fundamental right to organize and to bargain collectively through representatives of their own choosing for the purpose of negotiating wages, hours, and working conditions, and to protect their economic welfare and safety at work. Mr. Poulos, in plain terms, what would this amendment do?
Yeah, good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to be here with you today. So in plain terms, this amendment creates a safer workplace for individual employees in the state of Illinois, puts more money in their pocketbook, and gives them a voice in the workplace that is beyond just statutory, but is a constitutionally protected fundamental right.
And you say beyond statutory or other language. How is this different from existing protections? Aren't there some of these protections around already?
Sure. There are these types of protections both at the federal and state level. But the problem is that employees have to rely on legislators, right? So when you have an unsafe working conditions, you have to hope that there's a statute that's in place that will actually protect you. If there's not, you have to go to your local legislator, get individuals in a majority from both the House and the Senate to approve it, get the governor to approve it, and then create that safe working environment. Much like the First Amendment, freedom of speech, or the Second Amendment, right to bear arms, or the Fourth Amendment, right against illegal search and seizure, this gives you a fundamental constitutional in the very place that you spend most of your life in.
And Jacob Huebert, you oppose this amendment. How come?
Well, people need to know that this amendment would do absolutely nothing for workers in the private sector. Federal law already governs collective bargaining in the private sector, and the Supreme Court and other federal courts have been very clear that states cannot enact their own laws to govern private sector collective bargaining. So although this appears to give new collective bargaining rights to all employees in Illinois, the fact is what it really does is give stronger collective bargaining rights to public sector employees and their unions in Illinois. That's what this amendment is really about. It literally would do absolutely nothing for private sector employees.
Jacob Huebert, do you agree it would do nothing for private sector employees and strictly benefit people in the public sector?
Yeah, so I think that question was kicked over to me, Mark Poulos. We wholeheartedly disagree.
Thank you. My mistake. But the basic question: would it benefit primarily workers in the public sector and not really do anything for people in the private sector?
This amendment does everything for everyone. The text of the amendment starts with the term "employees shall have the fundamental right to." Quote, end quote. That's how it starts and that's how it ends. This amendment applies to every single employee. Every employee in the state of Illinois is on the ballot on November 8th. So where you can choose politicians that you want to run for office and you think you want to favor them, you can favor yourself and vote for yourself if you're an employee in the state of Illinois. There are a plethora of exclusions of individuals in the National Labor Relations Act, in the Railway Labor Act, and all other federal acts. So it applies equally to both. Both Jacob and the folks at IPI and other institutions attempted this argument in both the state court and at the appellate court and failed miserably. Both the state court dismissed a petition to file a complaint against this, and the 4th District Appellate Court also sided with the trial court and dismissed that.
Jacob Huebert, how about that? You have had a couple of defeats in the lower courts. You're appealing to the Illinois Supreme Court. Why do you think the outcome might be different there?
Well, the Illinois courts have said nothing about the issue I just raised. In fact, the Illinois courts have only said so far that taxpayers can't challenge this amendment before it's passed. But the Attorney General hasn't even argued that we're wrong about what I just said, about the fact that this would do nothing for private sector employees. Sure, it says all employees in the amendment, and they put that there, I guess, so that you would think that it applies to all employees. So if you're in the private sector, maybe you'd want to vote for it because it would do something for you. But in fact, the law is clear that they cannot give this right to private sector employees. So after this thing is enacted, if it is, it's only going to be able to give protections to public sector employees and, yes, the relatively small handful of private sector employees who are outside the scope of the National Labor Relations Act. But of course, the overwhelming majority of private sector employees are covered by the National Labor Relations Act, and this amendment would do absolutely nothing for them. And the courts certainly haven't said otherwise. And again, the Attorney General in defending this hasn't even said otherwise. The Attorney General's office has just said, well, this should go on the ballot anyway. Taxpayers shouldn't be able to challenge this right now.
Mark Poulos, another argument against this by your opponents is that it would basically give unions too much power and result in higher taxes. Respond to those concerns.
Well, let's just start with the first point, which is giving unions power. Giving unions power, give workers power. Unions are one of the single most democratic institutions in the country. Officers, executive board members, business agents, elected by the ranks of their membership to represent themselves. So when we say the term unions, it is synonymous with the term workers, right? So what we're trying to do is not put unions on a pedestal. What we're trying to do in the state of Illinois is to say, we want to create a good business climate, but what we also want to do is create a good worker climate.
How about the issue of higher taxes? Presumably, if you're negotiating stronger contracts for public workers, could mean wages go up and ultimately taxpayers foot the bill.
Well, what I would say to this is there is no data that would suggest that taxes would go up by virtue of this amendment being passed. Now, there are folks out there that have just loftily thrown around things like, increases in property taxes and other. But what I'll give you is some data. Illinois Economic Policy Institute actually just performed a study where it looked at strong collective bargaining states, which Illinois is and would be stronger with this amendment, versus those that are not strong. And what it found is that individuals in strong collective bargaining states are 3% less likely to live below poverty level, 3% less likely to rely on Medicaid, 2% less likely to rely on food stamps and government assistance, and contribute 8% more in state income taxes. So in terms of whether this is good or bad for the economy, the data speaks for itself, and clearly it would be better for the Illinois economy to put more money into the pockets of workers and create a safer work environment.
Mark, Jacob Huebert, we're almost out of time. I'll give you the last word. How about that? This is a big discussion, obviously, a big question. But do unions make the economic life for everybody better?
Well, Illinois has very strong public sector unions, some of the strongest in the country. And so take a look at Illinois' economy. Look at our taxes. Look at the businesses and residents fleeing this state because of the burden their governments and their taxes put on them. And then ask yourself, who put us in this spot? Who's influential that advocates for the tax increases that we have, for the high tax burden? Well, it's the public sector unions who push for these things. So people can think about whether public sector unions have been good or Illinois' economy when they go into the ballot booth to vote on Amendment 1, if it ends up on the ballot.
And gentlemen, that's where we'll have to leave it. Jacob Huebert and Mark Poulos, thank you both for participating. Important insights from both of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.